Jim Richards put the BMW 635 on the pole position on the grid for the first time in this year's Australian Touring Car Championship with a time of 61.5 seconds. Alongside Richards on the front row of the grid is the local hero Dick Johnson leading the Australian Touring Car Championship. His time yesterday 61.7 seconds. That's 1.1 seconds outside last year's pole position set by Alan Moffat. On the second row of the grid and making the comeback in the Australian Touring Car title is George Fury in the Nissan Turbo, a time of 62.4 seconds before he blew up yet another turbocharger in practice. Alongside him on the second row of the grid will be John Harvey driving the consolation prize, while Peter Brock's at the Le Mans 24-hour race. Harvey's time a very creditable 64 seconds, and he is the big danger in this race. On the third row of the grid comes Warren Cullen in the Kmart Commodore. His time 64.1 seconds, only 0.1 of a second behind the Holden dealer team car. The only man who can beat Dick Johnson for the Australian Touring Car title is Peter McLeod, and McLeod disappointingly yesterday in sixth position on the grid with a 64.2 seconds in the Mazda RX-7. Next row of the grid, Gary Wilmington in the Ford Falcon, a time of 64.6 seconds, and that's very good from the Sydney driver. And then a big surprise, young Glenn Seaton, the 18-year-old son of veteran Barry Seaton, put his 3-litre Ford Capri on 8th position on the grid in 65.7 seconds. Local knowledge counted for Alf Grant in the local Ford Falcon with a time of 66.4 to take 9th position on the grid. And Speedway star Barry Lawrence, borrowing a Holden Commodore for this race, recorded 10th fastest time on 66.6 seconds.
I think the most important thing here today is going to be the tyre choice by these drivers, because the conditions have changed. They've been very wet, they're now drying. And whether it continues to stay dry or not is another thing. We have most of the cars on intermediate tyres, that is slick tyres that have a light groove in them that will give them adhesion both in the wet and in the dry. But of course, if it dries out, the tyres can wear prematurely. If it rains heavily, they won't be all that suitable. So it's all a bit of a gamble.
1 minute to go. There are 19 cars on the grid for the sixth round of the Australian Touring Car title at Lakeside. That's the grid. On a drying track, most of the drivers, as Bob Morris says, are on intermediate tyres. Jim Richards, for the first time ever on pole position, he's only ever faced Dick Johnson across a grid like this once before, and he won the dice from the start. But on a wet track, he has to take a lot of revs, whereas Dick Johnson's got a lot of torque with the big V8 Falcon, and therefore might be able to get his power to the ground easier from the start.
He's got plenty of encouragement here in front of his hometown crowd.
And look at Richards start. Johnson's got no option but to duck in behind him, and here comes Harvey down the inside in the Marlboro Holden dealer team Commodore. George Fury around the outside of Harvey in the Nissan. Perfect start from Jim Richards. Nissan with Fury takes over third position from John Harvey.
And look at Fury go. I think he's really going to settle into this.
Peter McLeod back in fifth position. Behind him, Warren Cullen in the Holden Commodore.
And look at Jim Richards. Isn't he skillful there, throwing that big BMW around in slippery conditions?
Should be a little bit exploratory on the first lap, but these boys are really going for it. McLeod had to change a tail shaft after an early morning practice session this morning when a vibration appeared in the motor car. So he should be feeling out the motor car at this stage. McLeod, the only man who can really challenge Dick Johnson.
And look at Fury. He's coming right up there. He's in a perfect position. Richards covering himself.
John Harvey hanging back in fourth position. And this is Richards' big chance. After a dismal year where he's been as low as 16th position at Oran Park 3 weekends ago, and as high only as 5th.
Dick Johnson.
Third, rather.
Dick Johnson loves this circuit, his home circuit. He's very quick through this back part of the circuit under the Dunlop Bridge.
And now the little Nissan Turbo of George Fury climbing all over the back of Dick Johnson.
Johnson's having a little trouble getting his power down up the steep part of the circuit. Fury is very close here coming onto the main straight. He'll try and set himself up for a braking pass at the end of the main straight as they enter the Porsche carousel. You notice Richards doesn't have the wipers on. He has a clear track in front of him, whereas Johnson and Fury both have their wipers going full speed. And Johnson catches Richards as they come up to the BP rise there.
Richards seems to be working very hard at the wheel, Bob.
Well, he is working hard because he doesn't have the power of the V8, but he certainly has the handling and the skill in these wet and slippery conditions. Two cars here in the BMW and the Nissan that haven't performed creditably all year, and Harvey's off.
Harvey's off at Hungary, Valvoline corner.
Oh yes, and the Nissan's through. Fury's passed as they enter the main straight. The pressure's really on Richards now.
60.6 seconds is the lap time, an average speed of 142.6 kilometres an hour.
Look how Fury caught up there. Right on Richards' tail there now.
Lap record is 56.8 seconds standing to Alan Moffat, so we're 4 seconds outside the lap record in these sort of conditions. This is a big chance for George Fury. We're seeing the two drivers who most want to win in a straight-in touring car round now dicing for the lead.
It's interesting here to have three totally different motor cars. The six-cylinder BMW, the four-cylinder turbocharged Nissan, and the big V8 Falcon. All fairly comparable in performance, but
here comes Fury.
He's looking for a pass here. Richards is holding him out on the dog leg. Fury's going to have to be a bit patient, I think, because he has the big V8 Falcon breathing down his neck, and Johnson really wants to perform. And
here he comes.
He's passing a terribly difficult position down there.
And he's done it. So George Fury takes over the lead in the Australian Touring Car Championship, round 6 at Lakeside. Jim Richards in second position in the BMW. Dick Johnson in third position. Johnson has to finish third in the Australian Touring Car title here today to win his third Australian Touring Car Championship. He can afford to hold back and cruise, but that's not what Dick Johnson's doing in front of his hometown crowd.
Oh, he's a racer and he wants to race.
Lester Spurton retires the Holden Gemini, the slowest car in the event. Probably wisely so. George Fury opens a small advantage on the BMW.
I think he's opened a large advantage on that. This is Fury's first time racing here at Lakeside, and he's learnt the circuit very quickly.
I know it sounds silly, but conditions do suit George Fury to a certain degree, in as much as he's a man who loves a car that twitches and slides. And he's got magnificent car control.
The irony of it is that team manager Howard Marsden has left Australia this morning to go to Japan to check out the chances of their new Group A car for next year. And he can't see his beloved...
Here comes Johnson down the inside, gets balked by a slower car. There's 2.55 seconds separating the BMW from the Nissan in front of it.
interesting now. The track is drying a little. It hasn't rained for some time. A breeze has sprung up, and we could see the cars like Warren Cullen, who was elected to run quite a hard, comparatively hard tyre, a dry weather tyre with just a light groove in it. He's perhaps one that we could see coming up later in the race to challenge these guys if it remains dry.
Peter McLeod holds down 4th position. Behind him, Warren Cullen. Then comes Gary Wilmington and the local driver Barry Lawrence in a borrowed Holden Commodore. Behind him, Andrew Harris, and then Alf Grant. The dice for 2nd position between Jim Richards in the BMW and Dick Johnson in the Ford Falcon. Johnson is not being backward in asking for that 2nd position.
He's very fast around the carousel part of the circuit. Got the pressure right on Jim Richards.
The last round of the Australian Touring Car Championship was won, in fact, by my co-commentator, Bob Morris. Bob, just how much development is left in these motor cars?
Well, I think if the cars kept going for 10 years, it'd always be development. Somebody always finds a new tweak and something to make them go just a little bit faster all the time.
Must be
but there's
frustrating.
not much left in it.
Must be frustrating you today that you're here sitting with us rather than down there racing.
Well, I love to race, and I think in these conditions it would be a lot of fun, but a lot of hard work. And I can see that Dick Johnson is really sliding that big Falcon around. He's got the pressure right on Richards. Richards is very cool.
And here's Peter McLeod with Warren Cullen on the inside of him. This is a replay, and this is a manoeuvre that's going to take out Peter McLeod off at the top of the circuit. This is the Motorcraft loop. See Barry Lawrence's Holden Commodore coming through behind. Good driving by McLeod to recover from that and get back onto the circuit.
Unbelievable recovery.
Back to the dice for 2nd position.
Well, Cullen's being very aggressive there, and he's coming up through the field. I guess he wants to have a go at the leaders.
Cullen currently lying in 4th position. And he's some 15 seconds behind this dice for 2nd place. Behind Cullen is Gary Wilmington. Then Barry Lawrence. Andrew Harris. And then Peter McLeod in the Slick 50 Mazda. Followed by Alf Grant.
Dick's having a go here. He's having a go. Discretion was the better part of valor there.
Now a slower car to be lapped. He's getting very wisely right out of the way. Down into Hungary corner. Johnson in the overlapping manoeuvre backs off just a little bit. Coming up to lap now, Craig Harris in the Ford Capri V6. Only 19 years of age. Harris gets out of the way. Look at the lock that Jim Richards had on that car as he came through Castrol corner onto the main straight. .63 seconds separates this from the dice for 4th position, which is currently being led by Warren Cullen, who's just opened a gap of about 1 second on a furiously battling trio of cars behind him. Johnson sideways, holds it. It takes a lot of car control to get yourself out of that situation. As Bob Morris said, the track in an incredibly strange position at the moment, where it's dry in some parts, wet in the other. There's Warren Cullen in 4th position in the Kmart car. Behind Cullen comes the local driver, Barry Lawrence, Speedway ace of some note. This, in fact, is the car that Bob Morris raced raced with and won at Surfers Paradise 2 years ago in a long-distance endurance event. It has always been regarded as one of the very best racing Commodores built in Australia, Bob.
Well, it was built by Recar Racing, and it was a good car. It was driven by Ron Wanless at Bathurst, and I think from memory when I drove that car, I didn't quite win. I was second by a few seconds, but it was still a very good car. But Cullen's having trouble fighting him off here.
It's a very good drive from Barry Lawrence, considering his comparative lack of experience.
I think Lawrence is going to have a go at passing him before too many laps. He's right behind him, but when they get to these slower cars, which is always a difficulty.
16.1 seconds separates them from Dick Johnson, still lying in third position. So the gap closing somewhat. They had been out to 18 seconds. There's Johnson.
He appears to have dropped the pressure off Jim Richards a little. Jim has a couple of car lengths gap there, which is the most they've had all race, I think.
Johnson may be starting to think that third place and his third Australian Touring Car title wouldn't be such a bad idea. But boy, he's quick across through the motorcraft loop. Here comes Johnson again out of the slipstream. He won't do it there.
Shows you the power of the six-cylinder BMW and the V8 Falcon at nearly twice the engine capacity. You can't pass him on the main straight.
Johnson really wants that second position.
Well, there's
Fury in the lead, and the gap between Fury and Jim Richards is 4.73 seconds, so Fury opening a security gap.
Well, 4 seconds with so many laps to go. It's a nice buffer, but it's still a long way to go, and anything can happen.
This race over 35 laps, 84 kilometres. They're currently on lap 13. After 5 rounds in the Australian Touring Car Championship, Dick Johnson leads the title on 111 points from Peter McLeod on 80 points. The situation as far as points goes for the future is that if Johnson scores a third place here today, he'll go out to 131 points. Now, if McLeod was to win today, which seems unlikely at this stage, and also to win in Adelaide in 2 weeks' time, he'd score another 50 points on his current 80, giving him 130 points. In other words, Johnson only needs to give himself a security third place to win his third Australian Touring Car Championship. He won last in 1982, relinquished the title to Alan Moffat last year. Should Johnson take 3 Australian Touring Car titles, he will join Peter Brock as having 3 titles each. And Barry Cunningham is through Warren Cullen. Barry Lawrence is through Warren Cullen to take over 4th position.
Driving quite aggressively in these slippery conditions. It's good to see him having a go.
The all-time record holder in Australian Touring Car Championship wins is Ian Pete Gagan with 5 rounds on 4 Australian Touring Car titles. Both Bob Jane, who's at Le Mans today watching Peter Brock in action, and Alan Moffat, who we understand is in Melbourne watching us. Moffat broke his finger in his hand at Surfers Paradise International Raceway. Dick Johnson now down the outside.
And Dick Johnson's got him here. He's on the inside for the braking area, and he's through. You'll find that he's much faster around this Porsche carousel, and you'll get a gap on Jim Richards that I don't think Jim will be able to get back again.
Fury has the lead on Johnson, who is 5.15 seconds behind. Fury coming up to lap John Harvey, and Johnson's really going for it.
Well, I think Dick is finding the conditions are drying a little bit. It's possibly suiting his car a little better than the wet was, and he's taking advantage of it. Whether he can actually catch the flying Nissan is another thing to be reckoned with. But you can see the gap that he's opened up on Richards. It just shows that Richards was holding him up considerably there for a few laps.
In fact, the gap is 2.3 seconds back to Richards, while it's 5.32 from the Flying Fury back to the aggressive Johnson.
I think they're all aggressive out there today.
And Fury's through John Harvey. What a disappointment for John Harvey, who really was looking at this event today as an opportunity to really prove his mettle in Australian touring car racing, driving the boss's car. Fury flashes his lights at a slower competitor, and the gap drops. I'll check my watch again to be on the safe side. Drops to 3.11 seconds. Dick Johnson has hauled back 2 seconds on George Fury on that lap.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what George Fury can do, because obviously he's been getting the gap from his own pit, and now that he knows that Johnson's through Richards and catching up, we'll see whether he can actually open the gap again, or Richards is going to wear him down. Johnson's going to wear him down.
That's the position after 15 laps. George Fury leads from Dick Johnson, with Jim Richards in third position. But you wouldn't etch those results in stone at this stage. Johnson comes up to overlap John Harvey. Slug, as he's known in the trade, but certainly not for his driving manner. Gets out of the way, although normally he's the hardest man in the world to pass. 2.73 seconds is the gap between Fury and Johnson across the top of the Motorcraft loop and onto the straight. It goes down to 2.53 seconds.
Well, Johnson's having a go.
The question is, Bob, as Johnson's on intermediate tyres and the track is drying, will the tyres of the big Ford Falcon do 35 laps?
Well, they're both on intermediate tyres. Fury is on Avon intermediates. I'm not quite sure what compound. They could be quite a soft compound. Whereas Johnson is on Dunlop intermediates. Now, a lot depends on the compounds that they're using, whether they're going to deteriorate as the track dries. It's all a bit of a lucky dip when you start the race in these wet conditions, whether you're going to shower again as it did at surface, or it's going to dry, as it appears to be now.
Fury's taken the challenge. He's opened the gap to 2.76 seconds. Only marginally opening it, but he now knows that Johnson's there. Drops to 2.56 on the straight. And it starts to rain again.
George looked in his rear vision mirror there to see if you could see the green Falcon appearing over the horizon.
Fury currently lies in 18th position in the Australian Touring Car Championship, with only 15 points scored in the first round when he took 5th place at Sandown in February. Since then, he's had a dismal run, having electrical problems at Simmons Plains, and then having to take on the spare team car, only to have the rear axle break on the starting line when it took more power than it could stand. Then staying away from Surfers Paradise to try and find reliability matched with power, only to be taken out on the second corner of the Oran Park round when he made his return by Alan Grice, who tried to pass him on the grass on the inside going to the stop corner at the end of the main straight. And there's the slick 50 car of Peter McLeod. Back in sixth position.
I think a driver who's not particularly happy in these conditions, although he excelled himself at Service Paradise in a similar sort of condition. Perhaps it's his inexperience, particularly on this circuit. It's the first time that he has raced here, and it is a circuit that takes a little coming to grips with.
He's managed to get ahead of Gary Wilmington and Andrew Harris, however, after his off caused by Warren Cullen.
Rain comes down even heavier. Will be interesting to see what effect this has on the gap between the leading Nissan of George Fury and the second place Falcon of Johnson. Perhaps Jim Richards has ordered this rain. He might move up on them again.
Well, I'll put a split on the distance between Richards and Fury. It's a fair gap, in fact. In fact, from Richard's viewpoint, it's an unfair gap. He's dropped a long way back.
Perhaps that's why team manager Frank Gardner was at the back of the pit doing that rain dance, or was he stamping on cane toads?
20.77 seconds is the gap between George Fury in the lead and Jim Richards in third position. So it would take quite a deal of rain to let the Rainmaster make up that sort of a gap. With half the race now run, there's the 20-lap order: George Fury, Dick Johnson, Jim Richards.
Well, Fury now will be relying on the signals from his pit to tell him exactly how fast he has to drive in this race, because after all he only just has to win. And you can see Johnson's Falcon there in the background.
The gap is 3.65 seconds between Fury and Johnson.
The gap comfortable enough so that he can take his time in the traffic. After all, when you're lapping a car in these wet conditions, perhaps they might not see him arrive with the rain and move over, or whatever can happen. So Fury has to be very careful lapping these cars.
A big crowd has turned out at Lakeside for the FM 104 round of the Australian Touring Car Title today, mainly brought by that radio station, in fact, who have really been promoting this event this weekend. And you just wouldn't expect to see this many people at such a wet meeting, except for two factors. It's been well promoted, and Dick Johnson is racing in front of his hometown crowd
to win his third Touring Car Championship.
And for that, the Queenslanders would step over a whole nest of cane toads.
Fury's not resting there. He's really pressing on.
Two slower cars between Fury and Johnson, slowing him down through the loop, in fact, and he drops to 4.68 seconds behind George Fury. There's now not only rain but high winds sweep in across the Lakeside circuit and almost blow our commentary position away.
Well, Johnson, of course, wants to finish first of all, and secondly wants to win. So to finish, he has to be very cautious when he's passing his lap cars, because one off could see him right out of the race.
There's Barry Lawrence in fourth position, dicing with Warren Cullen. Cullen coming down the inside.
Not the place to pass, is there?
Lawrence has got the gate on him, but Cullen, as they come down the straight, is side by side with him as they come down past the start-finish line and may take over the lead as they go through the loop. Lawrence has to back off and Cullen takes it back over. Cullen in the Kmart car, lying in fourth position in the Australian Touring Car Title on 62 points.
been consistent this year, and his professional approach to his motor racing has helped him have consistent high places.
Well, he's had 3 5ths, a 6th and a 12th, in fact, in the Australian Touring Car title to date. And theoretically will be one of the few drivers who actually have to drop around by the seventh round of the series at Adelaide in 2 weeks' time. Drivers can test 7 rounds, but in fact they're counted only in their top 6, so they get to drop a mistake. Dick Johnson hasn't had a mistake yet. He's finished high in every round. George Ferry has had far too many mechanical errors. You can't blame any of them on the driver.
I think Nissan have been pioneering the turbo car, and it looks like the way the future will go in motor racing will be turbos, and Nissan have been pioneering for 2 years. And good luck to them if they can get their car up here in this sort of position.
This was the car that last year looked to be in the box seat for the Australian Touring Car title, because last year it was running in the under 3 litre class and therefore picking up more points than the outright cars under the point system. This year it's been reclassified as an outright touring car and must race against Dick Johnson on a point-for-point basis. And as Fury comes up the hill, Johnson's only coming down the hill, and the gap is now really opening up. So Johnson has probably found the limits of his adhesion, or has decided that the Australian Touring Car title really does mean something, because he is 9.4 seconds behind George Fury.
Well, I think he could see Fury in the distance and decided to really have a go. And then when he was caught up in the traffic there and started to slide around a little, I think he's backed off and used his discretion to try and finish this race in one piece.
After 25 laps, 10 remaining, the order still remains George Fury, Dick Johnson and Jim Richards. Richards is 25.6 seconds behind Johnson.
Well, in fact, the Commodores of Cullen and Lawrence are actually catching Richards.
3.16 seconds is the gap between Richards and Cullen, and that is very much the dice of the moment. There's Richards in the JPS BMW. Richards so far this year has scored a 3rd, a 4th and a 16th 3 laps down at Oran Park, after having his brake line torn off by the debris strewn up by the Alan Grice George Fury crash. And Jim delighted this morning that he'd taken pole position. First time ever that the JPS BMW has been on pole. As we watch George Fury, less than 10 laps remaining to his first Australian Touring Car Championship win in this year's series.
I think George has been using his rally driving experience to put him in good stead here today, because the racetrack has somehow resembled a forest rally road with all the water over it and all the oil too, which has made it extremely slippery.
In fact, Fury didn't get any wins last year either. He took 2 second places. A 3rd, 3/4. And Cullen is right on the tail of Jim Richards in 3rd position, coming up in a motorcraft loop. There they go, and Cullen now charging down the inside of Jim Richards and takes him. So the 3rd place changes in favour of Warren Cullen. And should Cullen hold on to that 3rd place, it'll be his highest placing yet in the Australian Touring Car title this year. And Cullen having his own little battle in the point score situation. On 62 points, he stands to take over third position in the Australian Touring Car title this year from Peter Brock. Brock racing at the Le Mans 24-hour race today will be back in time to run at the Adelaide round in 2 weeks' time. Brock currently holds 73 points in the title, and Cullen currently holds 62. A good result from Cullen today could see him hold out Peter Brock in 2 weeks' time to take third place in the title behind Dick Johnson and Peter McLeod. That'll be a good result for Cullen, who brought new sponsorship into motor racing this year with Kmart.
Well, I think Cullen has reached the position of his pit crew are informing him that he's really a long way back from Dick Johnson. And unless Dick has a problem, I can't see that Cullen could make any inroads on Johnson. And he doesn't have anybody challenging him from behind, so I think that he really virtually has to hold station to make sure that he stays on the road and comes home with a good, safe, strong third place.
And as George Fury leaves the main straight, Dick Johnson just comes onto it, so that's the gap between them. Meantime, the gap between Johnson and Cullen is 24.26 seconds. So that's, as Bob Morris says, quite unassailable.
Well, it's not quite unassailable unless we really get some drying conditions, because Cullen does have quite hard compound tyres on, and could seem quite a bit faster than the other competitors towards the end of the race if the track really dries out. Softer intermediate tyres would be taking a bit of a hammering by now.
Peter McLeod now moves to within 3.47 seconds of Jim Richards. So Richards obviously has a problem in fourth position. Dick Johnson a little bit sideways up through Hungary, aptly named in fact.
Johnson's car's been a model of reliability this year. Something that the big V8s didn't have in preceding years.
To a degree, Bob, it's been a bit forced on him, though, because the car still doesn't handle all that well, so he's not been able to explore the full potential of the engine.
Well, I think it's not handling too badly in these sort of conditions today. You know, if you have a bad handling car, it just doesn't handle in slippery conditions. And this car's doing a good job. And Dick's looking really good there right now. And he looked good at Surfers Paradise in the slippery conditions, where he drove excellently to take the win there in front of his hometown crowd.
George Fury happily in the lead on the last lap of the race, and this will be a big result for George, but it'll also be a big result for Dick Johnson, because with only 2.4 kilometres remaining, you've got to say that Dick Johnson has wrapped up the Australian Touring Car title for 1984, and the hometown crowd will go wild. While Everett's glowing red like that, it's not showing puffs of white smoke, and that makes George Fury very happy as he comes over the top of the hill for the last time, and he can now coast to victory.
Well, I think a driver's always nervous in the last few laps of the race, because you're always listening for the noises or whatever else can go wrong, and especially when it's only a matter of coasting the finish like he has.
And the checkered flag comes out for George Fury, winner of the Australian Touring Car Championship Round 6 at Lakeside Circuit, and here comes the winner of the Australian Touring Car title for 1984. In second position in this motor race, Dick Johnson from Queensland in the Ford Falcon. And Dickie's done it. 1981, 1982 and 1984 Australian Touring Car champion. Third position will go to Warren Cullen who comes up to lap John Harvey and won't pull out of the slipstream in time to do it. And there's the dice for 4th place between Jim Richards and Peter McLeod. McLeod desperately needs those points. Jim Richards can't do anything with them, really. And side by side, they come to the finish line, and it's anyone's race. And it's Jim Richards takes 4th position.
A good drive and a good result for Jim Richards in the JPS BMW.
Peter McLeod in 5th. And there are the results of the 6th round of the FM 104 Australian Touring Car title at Lakeside Circuit. George Fury won it from Dick Johnson with Warren Cullen in 3rd position. And after the 6th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, the race for 2nd and 3rd place at Adelaide in 2 weeks' time is looking great. Dick Johnson has won on 136 points, but then look at Peter McLeod on 95, Warren Cullen on 82, Peter Brock on 73, Jim Richards on 67, and Andrew Harris on 49, all still in points contention for major placings in the title. Bob Morris, thanks very much for joining us today. Let's go now to Bob Vincent with Dick Johnson.
Well, I think the honours belong to Dick Johnson for his 3rd win in the Australian Touring Car Championship. So first of all, we'll have a word to Dick before we go and see George. Congratulations, Dick, on winning your 3rd championship. And what wasn't the best of days, but you performed tremendously well.
Thanks very much indeed. It's been rather easy for us, really. It's been just the simple fact that the car has been so reliable throughout the season. We still haven't failed to finish a race, and I sincerely hope that we can continue on with the same run of luck at Bathurst. And my thanks goes to all my sponsors, because it's just been so reliable. It must be those Motorcraft parts.
It must be. And what lies in store for Adelaide? You're going down and, of course, compete in the final round?
Certainly will be. I don't see any reason why we should deprive the people or the spectators at Adelaide to see the car. It's every bit as much of the scene in Adelaide as it is anywhere else in Australia, so we'll certainly go.
And the Endurance Championships later this year, looking forward to that?
Yeah, very much so. It's the car that really, as I said, has been so reliable, and I think that's what's winning races, and I hope we can win races through that in the endurance title.
Congratulations, Dick, on your 3rd championship.
Thank you very much indeed.
Dick Johnson winning his 3rd Australian Touring Car Championship. And we'll just move across and grab George Fury, who also performed particularly well today, considering it was the first time that he'd raced on this Lakeside circuit, and he'd had a bit of an up and down year as far as this Nissan Turbo has been concerned. George, can we have you for a moment, mate?
All right.
Congratulations on an outstanding performance, George, considering this is your first time on the circuit and...
First time in the wet.
the first time in the wet.
Actually. Oh, it's Dick anyway. Yeah, it's a great thrill. It's good for the boys too that we've won one and they've worked very hard. Nissan Motor Company's been behind us all the way, and now we've proved our worth, I suppose.
It's been a bit of a disappointing year in many respects because you've been battling the speed against performance factor all year. How do you feel now that you've finally got one under the belt? And you've got the Endurance Championships coming up later in the year?
Well, we sort of have, without being big about it, we've known all the way that we had the potential to win. It was just a matter of, how long we had to wait, sort of thing. And we proved it last year that we could beat Brocky, and just that we had a run of bad luck this year. And I've been saying to somebody before that cattle market's up and down, and I've learnt that at farming, and I think motor racing is the same way.
Well, congratulations, George, on winning this round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. ABC Sport will join you again from Adelaide when we bring you the final round of the Australian Touring Car Championship 1984. Bob Vincent with John Smales and Bob Morris at Lakeside in Queensland for ABC Sport.